Hello and welcome to Leveraging AI. This is Isar Metis, your host, and this episode is going to be really exciting if you are in leadership position in any business or if you're just enthusiastic about where AI can take businesses in the world. We are going to talk about how can businesses enable exponential growth that is independent of the amount of resources that it requires. This is done through creating a digital operating model for a business. And we're going to talk about what that means and how to create the different layers in order to make that exponential scalability possible. What it means is that CEOs and business leaders must completely reimagine the entire business model and not just try to optimize using different AI tools that exist today. And we're going to talk on how to do that as well. But if you do that, if you're able to reimagine the business with AI tools, with a digital operating model, you can create blue ocean and exponential scalability for your business, which will allow you to grow dramatically faster than your competition and dramatically faster than you're doing right now. At the end of the episode, like every week, I'm going to share some exciting news that happened this week. But let's dive into creating exponential scalability in businesses using an AI first strategy. In the next few years, AI technology will change our world dramatically. Whether you are a business executive trying to catapult your business forward, or just somebody who refuses to be left behind and want to advance your career, this is the show for you. I'm your host, Isar Metis, a serial entrepreneur and an AI enthusiast. You'll hear invaluable practical tips from innovative business leaders, AI practitioners, and some of the brightest AI minds in our world today on how you can leverage AI in ethical ways to advance your career and grow your business. Hello and welcome to Leveraging AI, the podcast that shares practical, ethical ways to leverage AI to improve efficiency, grow your business, and advance your career. This is Isar Metis, your host. And AI can improve efficiency and get better results in almost every aspect of a business today. And for a good reason, a lot of the focus these days is going to marketing because of the literal magic that generative AI can do for more or less every aspect of marketing. But limiting the use of AI just for marketing would be a big mistake because you can benefit from using AI, like I said, in almost every aspect of the business, is just knowing how to apply it properly for that function in order to get better results. And our focus in today's episode is going to be product management, product development, product market fit, and how you can use AI in those aspects in order to have the best product market fit in the least amount of time with the least amount of resources, which is how you make your company more successful. Our guest today is Adnan Boz. He is the CEO of the AI Product Institute, which, as the name suggests, he focuses on exactly that topic, but different than a lot of quote unquote experts who popped up in the last few months as the craze started with ChatGPT, he's been doing this for 3.5 years. He's also the AI business course instructor at Stanford. So he understands both the practical side of this as an entrepreneur working in companies, as well as the theoretical side of this, deeper than probably anybody I know. And hence, I'm really honored and excited to welcome Adnan to the show. Adnan, welcome to Leveraging AI.
Thank you, Isar. Great to be here. Thank you.
Adnan, I want to take you back before we dive into the actual process of product management and how AI applies to it. You started your company 3.5 years ago. What was the aha moment, or if you want, the process that led you to understand that AI will transform the way product development works?
Thank you, Isar. That's a really interesting question and a correct question, actually. A lot of people ask that. And it goes back to around 2010 when I first started getting into AI. And at that time, I was already more than 2 decades in the software industry. And I came across these trainings from Andrew Ng in 2010. I learned about AI and machine learning, and I was fascinated. But at that time, I was working on high performance computing and utilizing GPU to actually provide solutions in the advertising industry. Then I started teaching at that time. So back in Florida, I was holding these meetups at that time, actually, with NVIDIA's help. and teaching people how to utilize these GPUs and machine learning. And then later, when I started implementing all these solutions for the next couple of years, I realized that the whole development life cycle of an AI product is completely different than the way I had been doing for 2 decades at that time. And I was at Yahoo. At that moment, I was a software architect. And then I moved to product management at Yahoo. And then I started seeing more and more patterns, how to do AI product development different than software product development. And the main difference is that regular software products are deterministic, where you decide for the program, you plan it, you write the specs, then you program it, then you deploy it, right? But AI product development is different because the nature of machine learning models is not deterministic. It's probabilistic. So think about it. In the past, you would just write, you would know the outcome, and the outcome would be 100% guaranteed the way you wrote. Of course, there are bugs, but also the use case maybe you forgot, but still all the use cases you wrote in, you will get the outcome. But it turns out that with AI projects, it's not like that. The outcomes are probabilistic. So in a probabilistic world, you start running these projects different because it can take a probabilistic amount of time, right? You can come up with different probabilities of projects, use cases. So the whole project turns into some unknown result. And here's the problem. Data scientists are really good with probabilistic models or probabilistic approaches where they really experiment more rather than defining more, right? Whereas software engineering, where I was coming from, is really good at defining, but really bad, really not very good with things that are not deterministic.
I'll add to that, business people, as somebody who ran 3 different companies myself, business people are not really good with probabilistic things. You want to plan and you want to know what the outcome is going to be.
Correct.
It's not always the outcome, but at least you have a plan and you can follow the plan.
Correct. Planning and ambiguity, it kills actually the performance of these people, business side, software engineering side. So I started leaning towards more data science. So I started working on training models on my own and working with data science, got into that area, even started a company, moved to AI back in 2017 and 18, I think. During that time, it became more and more clear when I started talking to a lot of companies that people really don't understand the nature and how the whole AI development lifecycle works. What we call today ML ops. At that time, there was no ML ops. We didn't call it anything. We just called it AI development lifecycle. Then in the last couple of years, the name AI ops, ML ops started actually surfacing. But basically explaining those to people became a job at the point when I was with my own company. Then at that time, I started teaching. I said, okay, let me actually teach people this, what we call today ML ops. And I started teaching. I realized that this is value. People really like it. Then I created a curriculum. I applied for Stanford continuing studies and they accepted it because it was such a unique topic there, AI product management. And in fact, I was talking to my admin at Stanford and he said at that time, he said, are you sure this is such an important topic that we can even drill down to product management level? It's just still like unknown, right? And I said, let me show you. Then I went over and they were like, they really liked it. Since these are nothing new to companies like Yahoo, Google, Amazon, and I worked at Yahoo in platform teams that deep embedded into these technologies. And I've seen that they have been using it at that time for the last decade. So it was nothing new for large tech companies, but the rest of the world outside of Silicon Valley, even in the Silicon Valley, smaller companies didn't really apply these techniques. So my goal was at that time to just tell it to everybody to get as many people know as possible. So then I also started in 2019 AI Product Institute to do it besides Stanford continuing studies on my own. Of course, my corporate career continued. That wasn't overlapping. I worked at eBay, NVIDIA, because since it is training, it's not overlapping with their core business proposition. And I had more than 1,000 students. They're happy and getting their hands on the AI product development and utilizing this information to deploy their own products.
Fascinating. I want to add one thing to that will explain maybe why this is so important. In my eyes, in the very near future, and definitely within a few years, there is not going to be a single software product that does not have AI functionality in it, because if it will be, it will cease to exist because the competition will have these tools built in, and hence you will run out of business because the competition will be able to do things that you cannot do, or that your software or that your product cannot provide. So if I am within let's call it a traditional software company today, and I understand what I just said, that we have to start infusing AI functionality, tools, backend capabilities into the product that we're developing, what do I need to do? What are the steps that I need to follow in order to be best prepared and get the most successful outcome in that process?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of people are asking it right now in the generative AI era, right? And the answer is actually twofold, even maybe threefold. So first of all, we are in a disruptive time. So every market is being disrupted, right? That is one thing. Until last year, I would say until December, that wasn't the case. Until last December, in order to get into AI, you had to implement something named digital operating model. If you read the book from Professor Ian City, Competing in the Age of AI, they actually did a lot of analysis on many companies, and they figured out that the reason these large tech companies are large tech companies, that they're growing exponentially, is that they have something called digital operating model. So if you just keep out this generative AI disruption, if you want to take your company into the field of AI and become an AI first company, AI first, that is a term Google came out about 5 years ago. So they said, we are an AI first company. If you want to move from mobile, 10 years ago, mobile first was the thing. Now, then 5 years ago, the AI first started. Then you have to implement that digital operating model. And Professor Ian Sethi, they're from Harvard Business School. They did this analysis and they figured out that a digital operating model gives you the exponential scalability. In economics, when you start scaling your company in the economics theory, you hit a point where where scale doesn't make any sense anymore. Those are diseconomies of scale, because you have human in the loop. You have actually physical interaction there, and physical world doesn't scale exponentially as digital world. And they looked at companies like Amazon, I don't know, Facebook, these big companies, and they have a digital operating model where they scale exponentially digitally. Adding another user has zero marginal cost, right? For Amazon, right? Any new customer comes into Amazon, it doesn't cost them extra money like a customer comes to another company, right? And here's also the interesting part. They add to the value. So every user they add increases their capacity to serve other users, right? Because their machine learning model suddenly becomes more richer with extra users. So that gives them this a cycle where they can exponentially grow their value to the customers, as well as extract exponential value back from the customers. And so first thing, companies really have to jump on that bandwagon of digital operating model. So a digital operating model, you will see in the book, looks like, and we had it at Yahoo actually even 15 years ago. So you have this data layer, it's horizontal, and all the data goes into this data lake or data layer. And then on top, you have this API layer or some technology layer where you have this machine learning models and other things. And then there's, again, a team is holding that. A team is delivering that. And then on top, you have this application API level that provides all these different APIs. Then you have these different use cases from different teams. This could be vertical, especially in larger companies. You have these multiple product portfolio products, and you hooked it up, although maybe there are different use cases. But here is the interesting part. Every piece of data getting into this digital operating model becomes suddenly a citizen of the whole company, and you can utilize it in finance, in marketing, in logistics, in your product development, in your engineering, wherever you want to utilize this. And a non-digital operating model looks more like a small silos where finance team has their own data input. They just use it there. Nobody else can use it. And I don't know, marketing team has their own data source they generated, and then they can use it only there. So once you apply these to your company and become actual digital operated company, then you can start thinking maybe going into generative AI and utilizing it. So you can actually utilize this exponentially growing, exponential scalability in that field as well. So this is the second section of my answer. But before I go
this was fantastic. I think it's really eye-opening. And I have a very tough question to ask, which I'm sure doesn't have a simple answer, but I think people who are, again, if you're a CEO today or a head of strategy, you got to understand this. You got to understand that without going in that direction, you're doomed. And you might be doomed in a year, might be in 3, but you're doomed. You have to go in that path because your competition will, and then will run circles around you. But what you just mentioned is, you gave it a name, but it's a very significant architectural change on the underlying layers of everything that you do. So if you're running like a traditional software company, like you're saying, you have a database for this, a database for that, a database for this, each one of them serves an application layer directly, usually, or in most cases through an API layer. But there is no that one layer of data that everything feeds into and one layer of machine learning that rides on top of that under everything else. What's the process companies have to go through in order to make that transition? Is it even possible, or do you have to rebuild on the side kind of thing and eventually kill what you have today? And again, you've been doing this for a while, so I'm sure you have some answers. I don't know if people are going to like them, but I'm sure you have some answers.
Yeah, this is a great question. A lot of companies ask that. And before that, to just step back, there are really 3 things you need to change in a company, especially in these disruptive times. And the first one is the infrastructure model. Yeah, you want to maybe develop these layers and create new actual technology there, which can serve all your products as well as your company. And that's the infrastructure model. Then you have the operating model. And the operating model is the way you do business, right? The way you create your products, the way you bring the products to your customers, the way you actually charge them, and everything you do in the operating. Then the third one is the business model. And the business model is what value you provide to the customers. That's your value proposition, and that's your sales and all that stuff, right? Now, between infrastructure model, operating model, and business model, the easiest thing to do is actually infrastructure model, because you start modernizing, you start optimizing your system. So if you have, let's say, 50 databases, 50 data sources, let's say going into 50 databases, then you start merging them slowly. You actually create bigger database. You don't have to do it at once because that will create a lot of disruption, a lot of problems internally. So you start merging them one by one. So you first merge 2, 3, and then go from there. And then you go to your machine learning layer, where you have all these different smaller SDKs, APIs working internally, maybe a lot of models. Then you start to figure out, hey, how can I create standards here? So can I have a natural language processing NLP system that solves all our NLP problems across finance, all the way to legal, all the way maybe to marketing, right? So one single NLP system that can solve everything. Let's say you hook up to OpenAI APIs.
Yeah.
But then you think, hey, can we have an image recognition system, like image recognition solution that can solve all our image recognition problems? So you start putting these group of solutions together. And eBay did it really good. Back in time, when I think it was 2019, when I was at eBay, they split it in this way. So we had a whole NLP group. Even at Yahoo, we had a whole NLP group who was working on this 50-step NLPs at the time. But separating like this, it gives you actually this platformization layer where you have these different platforms. And if you go to any cloud service provider like AWS, Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, IBM Watson, or GCP, you will see that they operate in a similar way. So you go there and you will see there's a whole section about language processing. There's another section about image processing. You create this layer. It could be really some cloud provider, or you maybe create it internal. It doesn't really matter, because that is more about buy versus build versus rent decision. You should provide to your company all these different layers. And then you create actually the API layer. And that goes about the infrastructure. So you can do the infrastructure slowly. That is fine. The little more difficult part is changing the operating model. And when Ianseti is talking about digital operating model, and of course, there's flavor of infrastructure model where you have to do your homework. The bigger problem is that they're talking about the operating model. Now, the way people think has to change. Your culture has to change a little. Because in a classical operated company, and you most probably have been there as well, people, as we said, create these deterministic solutions. Even maybe marketing department doesn't really think exponential way. They may think to write I don't know, 10 blog posts, or maybe do these ads to do those ads, right? Maybe 10 ads a week. So can you imagine doing 10,000 ads a week, different ads a week? Or can you think of being able to write 10,000 varieties of blog posts? So the mindset has to change a little towards exponential rather than limitations of the old world where you think where you do things sequential. As well as maybe you have to introduce different aspects to your operating model to remove certain bottlenecks. So people have to start thinking, hey, what is the bottleneck in my process where I cannot grow exponentially? The simplest, for example, marketing, right, is trying to figure out, running some experiments. They're trying to figure out what is the best message to my customers. And we had that problem back at eBay as well. And eBay did a lot of marketing at that time. And the problem was, okay, we are sending these emails, right? But which email subject is the best subject? There's maybe billions of possibilities you can really write that. Because they were leaning towards AI a lot, when the operating model was changing at that time, people started thinking, hey, well, instead of writing these emails manually, how about we remove that bottleneck and we turn it into an experiment, hook it up to AI that can generate these subjects, and based on some heuristic, some logic, of course. And then we run, let's say, I don't know, 10, 20 experiments about this in a month, and then see which one is going to be the best for that particular time, in that context, for that product. And then we go with that. So people have to start thinking in a different way. That's, I think, the biggest change in terms of operating model.
I agree 100%. I want to add one thing that connects to this very nicely to what you're saying right now. I say a lot, and people have been listening to this podcast have heard this, but I say this on lectures that I give on stages and in the courses that I teach. We're moving from an era of improved process efficiency to an outcome. Meaning, if you think about everything we developed through human race until now was about, how do I make the process better? How can I do more of this thing? And let's use the example you give. I need to write blog posts. So how can I write faster blog posts? Okay, so there's SEO research tools that make it faster. And there's templates that I can use to do things better. And there's WordPress plugins that allow me to put in the pictures without having to worry. There are ways to improve the process. And what machine learning and AI enables us to do is to get the outcome. I want 10,000 blog posts, and you will have them. And especially now with the era we're moving into agents, and I'm not going to dive to what it is. If you're not, look it up. But you'll be able to get the outcome you want at any scale you want at seconds or minutes or hours instead of months and years that it would take before. And without the human overhead of, okay, if I want 10,000 blog posts, I need 5,000 writers to write those 10,000. All of that goes away. So the mindset, going back to what you said, the mindset of needs to shift from how can I manage a better process to what outcome am I looking for on every aspect, whether it's the business aspect, the operating aspect, the tech, what's the outcome I'm looking for, and find the solution for that. Because right now that solution is either exists or is at reach when it wasn't 3 years ago.
Correct. And you have a really great point there. And you know how it started, and our head is still there. We had industrialization, where we turned everything, industrialized everything, let's say car manufacturing or any other agriculture. And then from there, we moved into globalization. And with globalization, we got all these frameworks like Six Sigma, right? Try to improve efficiency. And Japan is really good at it. So they could really reduce the marginal cost of everything, of production of any industry, actually down to the very, very low margins now. But that changed now, I think, and not just I think, but I read that you hit a limit after a while. I mean, it doesn't scale anymore. Let's say you have a car manufacturing factory or a plant where you maybe reduce everything to the bare minimum with using Six Sigma or something like that. You really brought it to a point. But when you keep doing that, keep trying to optimize it, as you said. If you just still think that logic, how can I really optimize these one by one? Then there is a limit you will hit. You can never reach that point of exponential growth. So we have to put that head down. We have to remove that idea and start thinking outcome-based, as you said. Okay, I want to really assume that I don't know anything about how to do it, the how. I just know what I want at the end, right? And what I want. So by giving this what to AI algorithms, it can figure out the how part. And that is the main logical change and actually maybe cultural change for a lot of companies to adopt.
For sure. So you started talking about the problems, the operation side. What about the business side? So what has to happen on the business side to support this process, or what are the limitations or the difficulties that you see companies going through?
Yeah, business side, that is the golden question. Now, Jeffrey Moore says that no established enterprise can easily change their business model. If you think about it, business model is your company. It has, of course, operations and infrastructure and all that thing in it, but that is the value proposition to your customers. So everything starts with your business model, and then you align everybody. You even hire people based on that business model, right? And now think about it, your whole business is being disrupted. Take, for example, search, the whole web search business. So the web search has its own ecosystem. There are advertisers, SEO companies. Like, think about it. All those people create websites, put it up there. Now, I think that search business is being disrupted and turned into some chat conversation where you just ask questions and get answers. So you don't
going back to our thing. I don't care about searching. I care about knowing, and I just want to go to the outcome.
Exactly. Why do then why do you even have SEO? Then why do you have all that ecosystem around? It's very similar to moving from CDs to streaming. CD times, you had actual CD cleaners, CD racks, CD drives, CD holders, the CD ecosystem on CDs was bigger than CD itself. And now it's the same thing. The search ecosystem is actually bigger than the search itself. Now, but think about it, it's now dying, and you're moving to a new business model where people just want to talk to somebody to get information. Sometimes they don't want to get information. They just want to say, hey, I want to actually write a book, and just help me write it. I'm not searching actually for topics. More often than not, we actually try to go use the search to accomplish steps in our process to get to the outcome. Now you can just tell the outcome and it will give you the results. Yeah. And this is a business model change. And in business model disruption like this, like generative AI, the companies really apply 3 or 4 steps. So Jeffrey Moore has a book named The Zone to Win. And in Zone to Win, he explains this much more in detail. So he divides every enterprise into 4. And that's coming from this 3 horizons framework from McKinsey. You have this Horizon 1, 2, 3. Horizon 1 is your main business, core business. Horizon 3 is your research going forward. Then Horizon 2 is actually intermediate place where you transform your business, transform this research into your core business. And he divides into 4 because usually the productivity organization in a company who develops this product is different than the performance organization that sells the product and provides the value. Yeah. Now, in this 4 horizons framework, he explains that in order to change actually your business model, you have to go through this loop where first you incubate something, incubate an idea, and you have to incubate for a while. It's not just one day, right? We are talking about maybe 3 to 4 years. The way Microsoft invested 5 years ago in OpenAI, that's incubation. And the way NVIDIA invested about, 7 to 8 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, into AV, autonomous vehicle. And the way Google invests into certain things, the way Meta actually invested 10 years ago into VR. Now, these are all incubations you try to grow in your company. Then once it hits size, some significant size, it's usually maybe 0.1% of the overall revenue. Let's say if your revenue is $100 billion, so we are talking about still $100 million revenue. It's not small for a lot of companies, but you have to grow your incubation to that point. Then he says that you have to transform it into your core business. And that is where all companies fail. He lists like 50, 60 companies who failed from, and there are many names. I don't want to name them now, but so the main problem is that when a company thinks of incubation, if they're not experienced, what they do, they steal some resources from their current core business. Their current core business is a revenue machine that is generating, we said, $100 billion. So how can you steal from it while your investors are asking from you 10% year-over-year revenue? How can you take out 1,000 people from there if you have 10,000, 10% of the people and still expect the company to generate that amount of revenue. You cannot. And here's the interesting part. Even if you steal those people, most probably those people cannot work on your incubation, new business, because they were hired to work on the current operating model, the way they do the business. So when you create this new incubation to change actually your business model, you need new people. You need actually trailblazers. You need people who are entrepreneurial. You need people who want to jump onto topics, take high risks. Whereas the other people who are in your current business, core business, they don't take risks because you deliver year over year to your promises. So you hire this new team. That is why a lot of companies have these groups separated physically, even building-wise, in another location, and then you incubate it. Then you start transforming into a business line item, as Jeffrey Moore says. And
I want to pause you a second and ask you a very interesting question,
Sure.
because I never worked at a huge enterprise. Like the largest company I worked for, which was pretty big, was like a $7 billion company. And we had, I don't know, 10,000 employees around the world. So not a small company, but not a huge company. But most of the companies I worked for were startups. And we had between 30 to 100 people. And the company I worked with in between was a travel company. We had less than 1,000 people. So we had 800 people. It's a lot harder than to do this thing. So if I'm now running a tech startup that is doing okay, like I have good margins, I'm selling, I'm growing, but I'm looking 2 years ahead, and I understand what you and I are talking about, that I gotta infuse AI into this thing, and I gotta go through the process that you very clearly described. But I don't have the manpower, the bandwidth, the resources to now incubate 5 different ideas. I maybe can bet on one, maybe. How do companies do that? What's the right process to figure out the most likely thing to? You got to make a bet, because if that bet fails, it might be the last bet you make in that business.
Correct. Yeah, that is a question a lot of companies ask. It's a really good question. And the answer I found by working with a lot of companies is a strategy called Blue Ocean strategy. And these two professors, they came up with this logic, I think 10 years ago. And the book is so famous, actually. It's a bestseller. They have their third book now. And it explains that in order to grow into actually a new business, you have to find the blue ocean. Because the way companies really operate, when you go through the product development life cycle, and when the actual technology goes through technology adoption life cycle, when the categories mature, everybody is fluctuating around the same idea, same offering. Right? Let's take, for example, e-commerce. Go to any e-commerce website today, they're all the same. They're maybe 10% different up and down. They have all recommendation systems, they have a search, then they have these listings, they're all the same. Now, how do you really create something more valuable to your customers that will actually separate you from your competition, especially with AI? You employ their frameworks. So they're really good frameworks like the buyer utility map, 4 actions framework, strategy canvas. That's the last one you actually utilize. So utilize those tools to identify a blue ocean. That means a place for you that is different than the current competition, and removes the product features and other things that competition forces, but brings value to the customers, unprecedented value to the customer, so that those customers will come to you, and they will also have high barrier to entry because you changed the business model so much they cannot change it overnight. So if you apply blue ocean strategy, that will allow you to find the niche idea that will keep you apart from the competition, as well as add unprecedented value to your customers. So it's the first.
I love what you're saying a lot, because it reverses the sequence in which we spoke about things. We spoke about technological infrastructure, and on top of that, the operating infrastructure, and on top of that, the business infrastructure that talks to the customer. And the real thing here in what you're saying is, if you want to do this, and you want to do this in an effective way, especially as a smaller business, the trick is to really understand the needs of the customer and the value that you can bring in a unique way that nobody else is doing right now, and then reverse the process. Then say, okay, in order to do that, our business model needs to be this, which means our operating model needs to be this, which means our technology needs to support it. So the starting point of this process, and I agree with you 100%, the smaller you are, the more critical this becomes, because If you're Google, you can make 100 bets on any given point, and they do. That's why they change it to Alphabet. They have all these other businesses because they knew that search one day will die. And that drives, I don't know, today, 80% of the revenue, probably more. And so they have eggs in all these different baskets. But if you're a smaller company, you probably have enough resources for one of those bets. And what you're saying is the key to all of this is to really understand the need. What can you solve? How can you provide very unique value and invest everything into that, where now it will be harder for people to catch up because now you have a new category of business that did not exist before, in which you are the only solution, at least in the beginning.
Correct. Said. And here's the trick, right? And it says maybe not so common sense. And a lot of people try to utilize common sense and they think blue ocean strategy is just really understanding the user. And I can go talk to user, but I see it again and again. And I teach it in my classes as well. We do workshops on blue ocean. Now, the biggest impact of blue ocean is to have you step back, look at the whole end-to-end life cycle. So when we work, and that happens actually to a lot of companies who are getting new into the AI, what they do, because they live in this closed loop area, closed loop solution, they cannot think outside of that box. So for instance, if you're doing e-commerce and you think, okay, what can I do with AI in e-commerce? Let's say you want to apply AI there, and then you start thinking, oh, how about I add a recommendation engine? Or how about I make the search better? Maybe I should add a chatbot, right? All in the box, all in the box. You're thinking really from the problem. Okay, Blue Ocean suggested, okay, step back. Let's see, how does this user even start thinking to buy something? Let's go back. And let's go back to the point where they actually sit in the porch with their neighbors and they see a barbecue in their neighbor's yard. Start there, all the way there. Then they see it and they create the need, and then they actually create the want. Then based on their income, they create the demand and they go to the website, they search. Maybe that's not the only thing they do, but they want to really buy this barbecue because they saw it in their neighbor's backyard. And developing this understanding of that everything starts with a need, then turns into want, then turns into a demand based on your resources, it is really important. It's really important. So when you go back to the need and figure that out, how that even started, then you start coming up with very unique solutions. Maybe instead of creating a recommendation engine, maybe you're gonna slap a smart sticker on the street. Could be even that. Or maybe you put a sticker on the barbecue devices on their neighbors so they can see the brand and shop directly instead of going actually to a website to search. You can come up really with interesting solutions which no competitor thinks, because competitors are locked in that box. Oh, how can I optimize my website, my e-commerce website? That's all they think all day long. And with AI, that comes even more important, because what AI brings is far beyond than just optimizing what you have right now. It requires you to have a new way of thinking sometimes. Like, for example, Google search. Let's assume you are actually Google search and you're the VP there and you're thinking day in, day out in the 2000s, how can I optimize search? You maybe make it faster, more beautiful, maybe more different colors. That's all you think all day, right? And the algorithm gets maybe better, but you never really think, hey, can I use it here in natural language processing, a large language model, to turn it into a chat? You won't think that because it's not in the realm of your solution at that moment. So in order to think about that, you have to really step back and ask yourself, hey, how did the user even think about going to Google? So why did they go there? So you think, okay, oh, they're at home, they have friends at home and they want to cook something. And the guy is thinking to maybe order something or cook something, and then they go Google for something. Or maybe they're curious about a movie. They just watched a movie and then they go Google about it. So if you go back to the point where their need starts, then maybe you can even just remove the whole search and say, okay, the guy is just curious about a movie. Why don't I put the actual icon on the movie on Apple TV? They can just click there and get the information, right? You suddenly eliminated search. But here's the thing. If you're the VP of Google search, you would never think to eliminate your whole organization. That actually is the Achilles heel of large organizations. So for an organization to change, large organization like Google, or we are talking about 10,000 of people, to change their business model, they have to think to kill themselves first. And nobody I know would actually think, hey, can I just close my department and fire all 1,000 people? That's not part of their goal, right? They won't think that. So that is why you need product managers, you need CEOs who can see the bigger picture and think of even changing the whole organization to a new organization. And you need that higher level view. And only CEOs can do that, or sometimes product organizations. In some companies, the product organization is connected to the VP of products and CPO, Chief Product Officer, is separate from the technology org and other places. And that gives them the power to make those changes. But in some other organizations, the product organization is connected under, I don't know, tech, CTO maybe, or maybe marketing somewhere, which is irrelevant, but they don't have that power. So at that moment, the CEO has to make that decision. So it goes back to the organization and how you also structure, as you can imagine.
I think these are really valuable points. I think they are, especially now with the level of disruption we are going to see because of AI, it becomes even more critical. And like you're saying, the understanding that the business model that you have today may not exist, all of it.
Correct.
I'll give you a few examples. I'm consulting to different companies on how to approach AI. And I had a conversation with the CEO of a very large legal company, one of the biggest in the nation. And I told him, did you think about the fact you may not be able to charge per hour, at least not for paralegal work moving forward, which is, I don't know, 50% of your income, sometimes more. And he's no. I'm like, think about it. All paralegal work will disappear or will be minimized to minutes instead of have a team of 5 people working on your case, researching, collecting information, putting it together, analyzing it. And they're going to work for 3 months. So that's going to be $1.2 million worth of paralegal hours. That all goes to 6 minutes of an AI machine that can to do all of that. So that 1.2 million is gone. What do you do? And so this is the paradigm shift that like you're saying, people at the helm, CEOs, leadership teams have. That's the way they have to think this way. And there's a lot of other examples, not necessarily directly AI related. Electric cars. So it's I think it's obvious to everybody that internal combustion cars are going to be a luxury that people who buy Ferraris may be able to afford, and everybody else will move to electric cars. And yet you don't see Ford saying, okay, I'm going to stop making all the cars I'm making today and start making only electric cars, because that keeps Ford running. So they have to find this interesting balance between how much do we cut the branch we're sitting on by selling something that right now we don't know how to make it, at least not profitably, and eating away our own market share and cake by giving away the stuff that we know how to sell today. So I think we live in this very unique moment in history where things like events that happen every now and then, like Kodak disappearing. Kodak was a global monopoly that very few existed, as I own 80% of a global market in something that disappeared to nothing because they were not able to go through that process. And I think we're going to see a lot of that happening in the next few years, of companies' valuations being spread to other competitors that have been around forever. Do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And I suggest every company to think that what if the marginal cost of the product I'm providing or service I'm providing is zero? What will happen in the market? So what will be the new equilibrium of supply and demand, right? This is the question they have to ask themselves. Because once the marginal cost is zero, that means you will have all kind of competition. Even, I don't know, a 2-man team company will be your competitor. And in fact, that is happening right now. For example, Grammarly, right? It is a great company. I'm a Grammarly user. So Grammarly is the assistant, writing assistant. And the day OpenAI dropped ChatGPT, it literally just killed at that moment the business, because now you have actually more intelligent technology behind. And they caught up, actually. They're pretty good at catching up with these technologies. They're still in good shape. Just that, think about if you would be a company, some other company who doesn't think what's going to happen, and suddenly the marginal cost of writing assistance becomes 0.001 cent per 1,000 tokens. That is the price of OpenAI API. And where Grammarly charged, I don't know how much I'm paying, like maybe $15, $20 for, I don't even write, maybe, I don't know, a couple thousand tokens. So suddenly it is like, we can virtually assume that it is zero already. So I want every CEO to think whatever they're producing, whatever value they're providing, that the marginal cost of what they're doing can go to zero. Of course, if they're producing physical products, there is always some extra cost there. But when things digitize, like Peter Diamandis also talks about this digitization in his 6Ds, when things digitize, they become exponential. But first, they don't become exponential. There are a lot of solutions. They charge $10,000. Then they charge starting $1,000. Then it drops to $100. Then it becomes a service you pay only $10 a month. But we are in a time, even that $10 a month is turning into $0 right now, the marginal cost. So I want every CEO to ask themselves, okay, what if the marginal cost will drop to zero? How am I gonna earn money with all that competitors in the same market? How will the new equilibrium of supply and demand look like? And that is where Blue Ocean strategy is really good. Blue Ocean strategy will take you out of that competition where marginal cost is zero and people don't pay money anything anymore for the product, and take you into a blue ocean, they call it, where there is no competition because you just innovated. And you can still ride that wave of innovation for a while, let's say another 5 years. Of course, after 5 years, when that becomes zero marginal cost, you again have to use blue ocean strategy to jump to another wave.
And I think these last 2 points are really amazing. And I think it's a great point to stop, because you and I think can go back and forth on this for a very long time. But I think in general, if I want to summarize the stuff we talked about, because I think we touched on many different points. One is the understanding that the future is very different than the present, and it's happening very fast. So if we were used to, okay, the next business cycle that I got to adapt to, the next innovation is in 10, 15 years, we're talking months. And that means you got to react very quickly, and you got to build that muscle of being able to continuously reacting very quickly, because this will just accelerate. And then, like you said, what are the tough questions you got to ask yourselves, and what are the major changes you got to make in your business on any of the layers that you mentioned that you got to take action on right now in order not to put your business at risk. Adnan, if people want to follow you, learn more from you, connect with you, work with you, what's the best way to do that?
Great summary, first of all. There is even a 4-step framework how to act right now. I put it on my LinkedIn as well. I gave a training when I was still at NVIDIA, about 2.5 hour training to executives, what to do from now on, right? And basically, as you explained, you first have to be present. You know these things are happening. You have to accept it. Second, you apply a neutralization strategy where you fix your operating model in a couple of months time frame, not quarters. Then you actually go back, fix your infrastructure model, and that is the optimization. And the last step is doing actual differentiation, fix your business model. So those are the 4 steps you go through. Yeah, you can find all information on my LinkedIn, Adnan Boz, or on Twitter, Adnan Boz, or aiproductinstitute.com, and you can download resources. I also write about these things on my blog post. You can follow me there as well.
Adnan, thank you so much. This was really incredibly valuable and really fascinating conversation. I appreciate the time you're sharing and the knowledge you're sharing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time you spent here. Thank you.
What an amazing conversation with Adnan. Well, this is not like most of the episodes that I've shared so far that are very practical. This has profound implications on the future success of a business. And as I mentioned in the beginning, if you're in a leadership position, this has to be the future mindset of any person in leadership position in the era that we're moving into. Now, let's move to some exciting news in the AI world that happened in this past week. First of all, Stability AI, the company behind Stable Diffusion, announced their next version of the model. They call it Stable Diffusion XL 1.0, different than the previous one that was Stable Diffusion XL 0.9. And it provides higher resolution, more accuracy, better colors, and overall better results than the previous model. It also supports in-painting, which is reconstructing missing parts of an existing image, and out-painting, which is expanding an image that currently exists. and even image to image prompts, meaning you can upload an image and use it as a baseline to then go and make variations to that image. All of that is available in the new model. I must admit that personally, I didn't get a chance to play with it and compare it to the current pack leader, which is Midjourney. But from what I've seen, it's definitely a big improvement to the previous Stable Diffusion model. The biggest benefit on Midjourney is that Stable Diffusion it's completely free, and you can get access to it either through their API or through their Dream Studio website. Another interesting news from the AI world that is not necessarily generative AI, but it's definitely really interesting to where this world is going, is that Google's DeepMind has unveiled what they call MedPalm M. It is a demonstration of a generalist multimodal biomedical AI system, which means it can get inputs and communicate across various aspects, meaning text, images, genomics, and other data as part of a single model architecture. It's geared specifically towards the medical world, and it's an amazing first step in the direction of having significantly better medical capabilities while making it cheaper and faster and more accessible to the masses. And when we think about the dream future of AI, one of the biggest promises is obviously solving some big human problems, such as various medical issues like cancer and so on. Very interesting news in that aspect from Google's DeepMind. Next piece of news comes from Stack Overflow. It's a company that, if you don't know, is probably the largest community of computer programmers and developers in the world. It's basically a huge community where people can come and ask for advice and get advice from other developers. It's been around for a long while, and it's definitely the largest and most active community of developers. And they just announced Overflow AI. So they are taking the data of 58 million questions and answers that exist in the community and making it accessible through a chat interface. The cool thing about it, beyond obviously the fact that instead of searching through an endless number of posts and hoping to find the right ones, you can ask a question, get a summarized answer from all the previous content that exists with citations to where the sources are. You can ask follow-up questions, and you can even have it help you draft additional follow-up questions to the community in order to get answers. Overall, it sounds like an amazing tool by Stack Overflow. And this obviously follows what we talked about many times in the show before. If you have a large amount of proprietary data, adding AI and LLM on top of that is going to make your service or your product even more powerful than it was before. And this is just another example of that. And from Stack Overflow to Amazon, Amazon is obviously one of the giants in the game. A while back, Amazon announced Amazon Bedrock. It's an infrastructure of artificial intelligence that runs on top of AWS. So if you're deploying your software on Amazon's AWS servers, you can use Amazon Bedrock that basically brings the large language models infrastructure as a native capability into anything that runs on AWS. And what they've announced this week, that they are releasing agents for Amazon Bedrock. Those of you who don't know what agents are, it's an expansion of a large language model. It allows you to define a task that then the agents will create multiple sub steps for it and will prompt itself and can take multiple different actions across things it has access to in order to complete the task. So this capability is now available natively for people who develop and deploy their solutions on Amazon's AWS and that are using Amazon Bedrock access to the different models. This enables close to magical capabilities to anybody who's using this platform. And I don't see Google or Microsoft staying behind. So I expect to see them releasing similar capabilities to their hosting platforms as well. And the last piece of news comes from Netflix and the backlash to a position that they opened. Netflix opened a position for an AI-focused product manager, and the offered salary ranges between $300,000 to $900,000 a year for that role. And the goal of that role is to increase the leverage of Netflix machine learning program. Now, well, obviously, if you're Netflix and you find ways to, as they said, increase the leverage of their machine learning program, it's a great return on investment to invest $900,000 a year in that program because the returns are going to be significantly higher. That being said, there's a really bad taste in the community for offering a salary like that for a single person, and especially in a time where a lot of people got released from large tech companies, in a time where actors and writers are on strike because of changes that are happening in the industry that Netflix is driving. So you have a large amount of people who are afraid to lose their jobs. And at the same time, one of the companies that has pushed them into that situation is offering positions at $900,000. If I connect this back to the topic of this amazing episode with Adnan, you can understand the connection. If you understand how to build a digital first and AI first company and you learn how to leverage that, you can reach exponential scalability and you can make significantly more money without investing significantly more resources. And $900,000 in the scale of Netflix is negligible. And so I expect to see more of that, meaning companies who are willing to invest in the right people, in the right technology in order to capitalize on this amazing transformation that's happening right now and come up ahead faster and better than anybody in their field. And before you go, I have two small requests. One is if you haven't done this so far, please write a review for Leveraging AI on your favorite app, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. That helps more people find this podcast. And on that topic, the second request, if you know people that can benefit from this podcast and you know they can learn from it, please share it with them. I appreciate that very, very much. That's it for this week. Go and explore AI, play with it, try different things, try different tools, and share what you learn with me and with the world. And until next time, have an amazing week.